Hey everyone, Andrew here, and just wanted to say, if you're here listening to the show, there's a good chance you're finding the discussions helpful. But regardless of how helpful the discussions may be on the show or any other content you think is helpful, sometimes it can make all the difference if you have a guide that helps you with what you're doing and how you're taking action. Whether you're uncertain of how to approach your specific challenges, building processes to create more awareness, or just wanting to optimize your current efforts, having a guide that understands your needs can help you find solutions to problems that keep you up at night. Look, I love helpful content and do my best to apply it in ways to help me grow the podcast and my business. But I also know for a fact that navigating some challenges alone or even with a team can be a daunting task filled with uncertainty. It's also the reason why I have my own guides to help me on my journey. So if you feel that you're struggling with anything in yours or feeling uncertain about how to tackle your challenges, let's chat. I'm always happy to learn more about you, especially my listeners. So if you're up for a chat, please visit rengenmarketing.com and click on Let's Chat in the navigation menu. At the very least, my goal is to get to know you a little so I can help guide you in the right direction. So thanks again for being such great listeners, and let's get right to the show. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about mastering creativity within the game development process. So in the fast-paced world of game development, mastering creativity is essential, but often poses significant challenges. So in this episode, we're going to explore how developers navigate the delicate balance between performance and aesthetics, drawing insights from classic games and comparing creative processes across industries. So join us today as we uncover innovative solutions and future possibilities of how you can come up with creative solutions to master your game development process. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back. And today with us, I have Lisa Karaseva. Lisa, how is it going? And thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. So can we, delve into the gaming conversation now? Yep.
Yeah, no, this is an exciting one for me, and especially because I know that when we were talking, pre-show, we had some really interesting conversations going on around this topic and something that I don't think is discussed too often in the space. But before we get into that, folks, Lisa, for those of you who aren't familiar with her, she is a physics programmer and mathematical modeling researcher. So lots of getting her hands, lots of in-depth data and info there, which is, I think, great. Also, she is a doctorate candidate in the physics simulation program at the University of, I'm going to butcher this, but is it Twente?
Twente. That's like, it's a region in the Netherlands.
Okay. So that's what she's doing there, getting her doctorates, which I think is awesome. She's also been at the Pavlov Institute of Physiology as a researcher. And when you're doing all those things, on top of it, you're also a Twitch affiliate too, having your own streams and stuff. Actually, if you don't mind, could you share a little bit about what do you stream in particular?
Well, I stream usually my favorite games. So I decided to start over because I started streaming 3 years ago, and it was more or less I was trying to get into what's popular on Twitch, but now I just decided I'm a game collector. I will just stream whatever I have in my collection, and basically I buy some games that I had in my childhood. For some reason, a lot of them are actually really expensive now, and I'm really regretting giving away some of the titles that I already had. But basically, right now, for example, I play Legend of Mana. This is one of the best games ever, in my opinion, and this is my favorite game in general.
Love it. And you know what? I think that's funny you called out to that in terms of having regrets about our collections that we've acquired over the years. I definitely have mine because I used to own a copy of SNES Chrono Trigger. And it's like, I'll never get that. I mean, maybe one day, but it's not going to be the same one. So,
Yeah, of course.
but yeah, I think a lot of us have our own regretful moments of the collections we gave up. Like, quick funny thing about me, I sold my GameCube so I could buy a flat screen monitor. That in retrospect, that monitor was 15 inches, which was big back then. The thing was huge, like super big. And at least I sold it to my friend, so I felt good about that, but I no longer had it. And it was for something that was going to become obsolete in like, 6 months. So at any rate, I try not to think about it. Good point. But, you mentioned video game collection. You have one. So I'm assuming that's kind of a hobby of yours. So are there any other hobbies or even want to share a little bit more about that hobby in terms of what do you collect in terms of retro games and such?
Well, I collect mostly first and second PlayStation titles. It's
Mm.
like my entire childhood. So yeah, I also have some titles on PC, but it's like less titles than PlayStation. And basically, I'm a Sony boy. Uh, uh, so yeah, I have also some titles that were released only in Japan. For example, Mizurna Falls. It's like one of the first ever games made with the open world and real-time clock, and it influenced heavily the industry. But it's only recently got this illegal, semi-illegal translation into English. But I have like the real copies for the first PlayStation, and also one of like biggest gems of my collection is the copy of Rule of Rose.
Mm.
It is considered to be like one of the most expensive ones for second PlayStation, in PlayStation in general. So yeah, I had it in my childhood, and I gave it up because I couldn't beat the boss there as a child, like as a 10-year-old. And yeah, I could have it, but yeah, I got a good deal for this one that I have now.
That's awesome. And I mean, the reason why you gave that up is the same. I have the same sentiment around Bloodborne, but I was an adult playing it, and I don't think that's going to change. Wow, we're bringing up some like bad pain points with me, but that's okay. We'll get over it, or I will. It's not your problem, so. At any rate, thank you for sharing that. Really interesting stuff. And I always respect people who have like really unique, interesting collections. And those are some good call outs of yours. So glad that's the case. Now, with that said, though, I'd like us to get to know you a little bit more. And to do that, we're going to go into the Q Box round. And folks, for those of you who aren't familiar, Q Box round is just a few random questions I have prepared here for Lisa today. So, Lisa, are you ready for the Q Box round?
Let's see.
Let's see. Okay, we'll take it. All right. First, what's one thing that most people don't know about you?
Well, people usually don't know what I actually do at my job, like daily at least.
Okay. And
So
anything to provide some context or insight in terms of what that consists of?
well, basically, I do research. Like usually, when I wake up, I get my cup of coffee and I read most recent papers on my work on mathematical modeling and physics simulation. I just take notes from that. Then I go like to university. Sometimes I spend some time in the lab doing some tests on material because I actually model the material behavior.
Mm.
So I work with the right now I work with the rubber because it's hyperelastic material. It's a little bit tricky to model, like to describe it mathematically how it behaves. And this is like the main idea of my PhD, actually.
Wow. That sounds like some pretty interesting stuff. And I mean, and I think that's cool too, because like we see these things happen in different areas and such, but yet there's very different, let's say, than games, but yet there's so much that we can draw from these other areas. At least that's been a thing that's been happening with me a lot lately too. So it'll be interesting to see how your processes and other things will connect to our discussion in a moment. So thank you for sharing that. That's pretty interesting though. Like really, really deep dive stuff. So I love it. All right. Next is, what advice would you give to someone else that's just starting out?
Well, just keep going, like work your magic, basically, because if you will do little by little, you eventually get somewhere. Like,
Uh,
that's it.
yeah. I mean, it's simple, but true. So love that. All right. And then the last final one here for the Q Box and the staple on the show is, what game are you playing now?
Well, I mentioned already that I'm playing Legend of Mana, and I also stream it like on Tuesday and Thursdays. Yeah.
And what else is in your lineup? What's
Well,
next?
right now, the next one, I think it's going to be Atomic Heart because I wanted to play it for a while, and finally, I will have some time for that.
Excellent. Well, great to hear. And thanks for sharing all those cool things about you and going through our Q Box round. And now, with that said, we are going to get into the core of this discussion today, folks, which is mastering creativity within the game development process. So, in light of all of this and everything, I want to kind of kick things off here with, can you share some of the key creative challenges that you've encountered or have you seen in game development, particularly, I would say, in the realm of physics programming and optimization? And how do these challenges differ from other aspects of game creation?
Well, I would say there are two key creative challenges in game development. The first one that I want to highlight is to create immersive physics simulation while maintaining performance. And I want to emphasize the immersive, not the most realistic physics in games. I noticed that the gaming experience is based on how you are immersed in the game over the realism. In some games, you don't need realism at all. So one of the examples, like popular games, for example, is a Human Fall Flat or Fall Guys. You don't need realistic physics of a body or an object there. The game experience is based on mastering the gameplay mechanics, like getting on top, doing something, and interaction with other players and being in this fun flow. Um, if we speak about like next gen AAA project, of course, you can say that you want to create a world as close to reality as you can, but in fact, there are some limitations to it based on the cognitive distortion. You can create something that is really, really close to the reality, but it will look off to some like to the player through the screen. And even in such games, you don't have it mm, like all of it. Sometimes, as a developer, you are kind of accept like the conventional realism, where you subconsciously accept some animations like ragdoll animations, beat them up games. Like one of the examples is like Yakuza series. When you like defeat the enemy, they are unconscious. It's like just ragdoll animation in there. But still, you kind of accept that, and also it kind of balanced out with some grotesque animations where you can pick up like motorcycle and beat with it everybody around you. So sometimes developers would opt to create non-realistic animation in game to avoid failed attempts to create like super realistic things, and fell into this state when you irritate the player. So when they see that something is off, but they cannot tell you what exactly. So it kind of looks good, but it's still something is off, and maybe even gives them like uncanny valley effect. But I would want to actually highlight one of the genre that kind of sometimes use it, like horror genre.
Mm.
You can see that in horror games and also in movies, because it can be done by the artists or 3D modelers when you like have like kind of normal woman, but she has some extended limbs, and you see that, and it's kind of creeps you out. But this can be done also by physics programmers. They can actually create the physics that's sometimes a little bit off. One of the examples, I would say Jack in the Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, because when you progress in the game, in the beginning he's just like insane old man who's trying to kill you. But as you progress, you can see that he's like twitching and, getting these weird animations in his like body and stuff. And this is actually one of the ways to actually use these strange effects when you kind of recreating the real physics, but still it's a little bit off. And also, mm, in this case, we cannot say that it's about the realism in general, because how can you would know like anything about like this type of horror experience if you weren't there? Like, how can you tell that it's real? And another challenge, of course, is like optimization, particularly is in like ensuring smooth performance, like in different hardware configurations. So it is quite important to remember like this hardware accessibility for everyone, for like, I guess, to target audience. And in case we get some restraints on the rendering, AI, procedural animations, memory. So it's kind of one of the challenges today, because we cannot like take games out of this business where it comes from, because you still have to consider the target audience, because producers and publishers have to make money still. You have to keep that in mind.
You know, I really loved these examples here. And I mean, to your last point too, I mean, yeah, in terms of like optimization and all these other things, you also have to consider like, hey, what are the costs? What does that do to the project? Does it extend that timeline and everything else? Even if you want to dial in as much as you want to in terms of whatever those goals, that vision is of the project, right? These things are important to be mindful of. But going back even more when you were calling out to I think it's super important talking about immersion and what that really means within that environment, within what that experience is that you're creating. Because I think sometimes we have a challenge of balancing what's that level of realism and then not. But then taking it a step further, and the example you used with horror, I thought was great. And I want to like add something else onto that as another example. But with the horror one, it's like, think about it, people, when we see things, and again, I think horror is a great example. One of the things that I think make effective horror is things that we are not familiar. There's a lot of the concept that we're all familiar with, I'm sure, is like fear of the unknown. And that's the greatest and oldest fear of all, which is, H.P. Lovecraft quote right there. But it's really true. And so it's easy to implement things like, light sources and stuff. That's like traditional, what you would see to invoke any type of fear because of that unknown aspect. But then when you have things that what you were describing essentially not real, or we could describe as foreign, not familiar, and almost to the point where we look, wow, that's eerie. It's because like, I would say effectively our brains can't process that because we're used to this, but this is happening and I don't know what to do. And it invokes those fears, gets a greater level of immersion, at least from the horror perspective. And it could apply things and looking at things with that lens, you can start doing the more creative side and what you were talking about from the programming. And the one quick thing I wanted to add was I think the same thing could apply done effectively with music or ambience and sound. So I would say like something to think about, but look at what Foley artists do, and not just so they're trying to mimic what an actual sound looks like, because sometimes the realism aspect is kind of boring. It doesn't fulfill what you think it should. Of course. Yeah, right. But then there's the other component. We'll go on the horror theme again, where if you're having something like, let's say you're using a musical saw and then you tweak the audio of it to sound just something eerily not familiar, and then you put that drop it so it's a lower frequency or whatever, and then you put it down as an ambient thing that can create tension and all these other things. And really it's about thinking of different ways to how to process those things. So now you're taking something that's very technically based in a way, but applying it in a way that just creates that much more immersion. And it doesn't just apply to horror, but we're just using that as an example because I think it's an easy one to draw some insights from.
Yeah, and also about the music, I have another example. It's a great example. There is a horror game. It was released for PlayStation 2, but I think on PlayStation 3 it also was somewhere in like Cloud Library or so. Houghton Ground. They actually used the hardware of the PlayStation 2 to change the pace of the music. So it was kind of written on the hardware of the PlayStation. So, and because of that, it was perfectly matching the whole pace of the game how you were playing.
Oh wow.
So,
Wow, I
yeah.
would yeah, that's like crazy. But again, it's like, look, there's lots of creative ways to think about that. So let's get into this a little bit more because some of these things we're talking about can be, let's say, a creative challenge, right? Especially as it relates to development. So and I know I'm going to say this word aesthetics, but I think we're also that may in a way encompass a lot more than that. So we'll keep that in mind. But let's say, balancing performance and aesthetics, that's obviously a crucial thing to consider in game development, right? But could you like delve into some, let's say, other strategies or techniques that you've seen that kind of strike this balance effectively, especially when it comes to, let's say, whether it's like animation design or resource management, or let's say any other aspect that relates to, the whole design and development process?
Well, I can name a few, but not all of them. But still, like on top of my head, um, there are several common techniques for both animation resources, and one of them level of detail.
Mm,
Like it's usually like level of detail system. This allow developers to adjust the level of detail of animation or the resource, for example, like the texture, based on the distance from the player's point of view. So it goes for both resources and animations. And in case of resources, yeah, you can use something lighter in terms of textures or some other resources. And for example, characters may have simplified animations or lower frame rates when viewed from a distance. And this reduces like computational load without sacrificing visuals because it's like still from the distance, but when you come closer, it's a little bit different. Another thing is the use of the blend trees and state machines. This enables developers to create complex animations efficiently. So it's kind of you trying to create perfect sequence of the animation, like because you have different animations because you can take a character and to make them do some different stuff one by one, one at a time. And so by blending multiple animations, you kind of create this seamless experience. Therefore, you create more immersion into the game. And this can be also beneficial to optimizing the game because the memory usage will be less for just switching from one animation to another. And also, it's really important to the aesthetics. So, and this takes really like good creativity from people who develop games to combine different types of animations and make it really seamless. And from this point, also, I can name like procedural generation. It can also be employed into physics and resources. So procedural animation can help the performance and guarantee realistic physics. But sometimes it's necessary to use so-called canned animations, like already pre-recorded animations, and just use it. And there is a turn back to the blend trees that I mentioned on my previous point. Yet again, to ensure the optimized performance by creating like these seamless, transitions. So procedural generation also used for environment assets such as terrain, structures, and textures. This can significantly reduce storage requirements while offering like this limitless variations in order to, you know, um, just load the world around you. And so, like the simplest ones I can name here, like texture compression. There is different types of image compressions, so it will have less weight in general. And asset streaming, this is like maybe less common to people. So it's basically when you load assets dynamically as you need it during the gameplay rather than loading everything up front. And this approach minimizes initial loading time. So it's like, for example, there is less loading time like on the loading screen, and this reduces like the memory usage, like the RAM that you have actually. Um, so this is like um, reduce the assets required for the current game state. So it's like here and now work, I guess. But enhance both performance and players immersion because you don't have these interruptions in between with the loading screens. And so there are many more techniques, I would say, and also different sorts of combinations of this, like that I mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, these are so awesome. And it's funny because I'm not so much into the development process, because of, I'm a marketer, but everything you outline too, if you really think about it, folks, it does, and like you ended there, it does kind of go back to, hey, what's that user experience like? What's that level of immersion? Uh and it comes down to time and resources and all these other things, right? Especially when it's on the player. And think about it. If a player is dealing with a long load time, that can definitely take them out of that immersion, just that aspect alone. So there's lots of other things to consider here as it ends into the end result of, hey, what is that player experience like? The other thing I want to call out too as well, and just kind of a follow-up question, everything you shared, from some of these processes that you shared, and I'm sure there's a lot of other ones that's using things a lot in a creative manner. What can that potentially do in terms of overall workflow for a team, whether it's a small team or even larger? I mean, does that help? Does it potentially help reduce bottlenecks and other issues that and challenges that developers may face?
Yes, of course, and especially if you start like implementing it that not after you created the whole game, because it's you can see this even in the AAA games when people just make the game as heavy as it can be, and then try to reduce like the resources and all that stuff. I would not name these games that I would say that would do that on the release, but it happens. And yeah, it's this is one of the things that I would say indie developers should keep in mind, that maybe you should you know try to uh, do stuff kind of lightweight in the beginning, not like during the process. And yeah, think about your animations and in general, like the maybe 3D models, all this aesthetics. What do you want to achieve with that actually? So maybe you even won't need anything really complex in the end if you will think about like maybe I can use some sort of simple animations. Maybe it's that as well.
Yeah, and I like that comment you just made too. What ultimately do you want to achieve? And what can you do to achieve that still provides, that positive, that immersive experience? Because folks, I'll be honest, I'm in this group too, but sometimes we just end up overcomplicating things, especially when it comes to our own projects and ourselves. We might look at things one way, and then later we'll come back and be like, oh wait, why did I make all that extra work, right? So I think this is a great example there too. And yeah, I mean, just so much can be drawn from there. And for anybody who's might be like, wow, this is a really in-depth like development conversation and not typical to the show. And the reason why I'm calling these things out too, because as you've probably heard in other episodes, I mean, look, what Lisa just shared with us, those details, they do relate to kind of the business side, the operational side of things. And hey, if you're reducing bottlenecks, if you are reducing the time it takes you to development, you can get to market faster. You can have more time for marketing. I mean, these things all relate. So that's why, again, I'm loving the insight that Lisa's sharing with us today. So on that note, too, I want to kind of go back into an area where you definitely have some expertise with, right? And it's more of, and kind of getting, let's say, more of these ideas that we've already been talking about. And it leads with classic games. Okay. So I mean, a lot of these games, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking of these two classic games you played as a kid. They often showcase remarkable creativity, whether it be in animation design or other factors, just design as a whole, despite hardware limitations. Because hey, they had to be super creative back then. Because X amount of megabytes of storage is not much to work with. That's
Uh,
yeah, but that said, can you provide like any examples how, older games like were innovative and how they tackled some of these challenges and how those lessons were can be applicable to, let's say, modern game development?
well, yeah, I have some examples. So one of the example I would say in games like Super Mario Bros. For Nintendo Entertainment System, characters were um, composed of small pixelated sprites, and they had also limited animation frame. Uh, but the human brain works in mysterious ways. Humans have a natural ability to recognize and interpret patterns, even with minimal visual information. Players also quickly learn to recognize and like find these patterns, even mm, with the small changes in details. Um, so also they learn to associate like specific pixel arrangement with the particular motion of the character, and also the brain has tendency to fill in missing information between like the content and prior experience. That's why I think a lot of people have these thoughts that in their childhood the games looked like awesome, because it's like your brain tricks you into thinking that. Also, this called phi phenomenon. This creates an illusion of continuous motion despite the discrete nature of visual stimuli. So you have this game kind of, when you look at it as an adult, you can see that it's kind of, slow paced, and it's like really in different places. But as a kid, it was like really dynamic game for you. And also we have a sensory adaptation. So through repeated exposure and gameplay, you become accustomed to this with those styles and to these animations. You kind of you have this muscle memory on how to play on the console. And from this, I would say modern games can learn to have the efficiency on sprite-based animation. So you can prioritize smooth movement and clear visual communication within limited frame count. I would say that the conscious implementation of the knowledge about human brain ability to fill the gaps and recognize pattern can be used for this immersive gameplay as well. Um, so another example is the use of limited memory. So it more or less, it's this one is more technical. So in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, developers used visual illusion to convey like movement and action with minimal animational frames. And this way, they created the Link's eyes and eyebrow animation. And so they used this technique with the sprite flipping technique. So it's basically a flat image was flipping with the change in frame. And in this case, you could see that Link's eyes and brows were moving, and it was done with really, really small amount of memory used. But this impacted greatly this like development of a character. The character kind of became alive because of that. And so developers today can actually employ the subtle animation techniques as well, because you don't have to have everywhere like the 3D models to be animated. You can actually trick some stuff into that, and maybe if it's even like in the background or so, you can use these techniques as well still, and it looks good. And I would say one of the things that you mentioned previously, to not to use too much in the games. I'd like to mention maybe Donkey Kong. Um, it was arcade game, and home consoles also had this game. It used limited color palettes and pixel art style again, and these hardware limitations was like this constraint that you had to obey. And I would say it still would charm you with the simplicity. Sometimes I think like in the games, the pursuit of these next gen animations, all these graphics in game development, people forget to focus on clear, readable character designs and animations. So sometimes people build too much on something is not clear from the beginning. So even the good game with the good ideas, like some great art, can turn out to be sloppy. And this approach can enhance performance on low spec devices and also appeal to players like to be like nostalgic, or maybe help some people to actually focus on the game design to create new game mechanics and so on.
And this is all great stuff. And I want to just add two more examples, very quick ones. But one is Bioshock. By design, they purposely wanted to have set their own limitations, being underwater and in a confined space. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to go into it. I know I'm probably shared this one point before. And then there's Silent Hill, which was more of a mistake. They wanted a big immersive environment that's all creepy, but realized, oh, the limitations of the hardware couldn't let us do that. So what are we going to do? We're going to basically make everything limited and foggy. And man, was that way more effective than what they initially planned out. So other things there, but one thing I want to call out to, I think it would be really helpful for some context, because a lot of what we just discussed is about limitations, what limitations from older hardware had and how they were able to use it and be a lot more effective. What would you say is the value of leading a project with a limitation mindset in this context of our conversation versus an ambitious or bigger picture, let's throw everything in? What's that advantage if we think about limitations?
I think it kind of give you the starting point if you have some sort of limitations. It's still like people say that you have to break the rules to get somewhere, but still you need to have like some sort of rules to break them gracefully, I think. Um, because if you just have everything next to you, you don't really have idea where to start with. And also, for example, if we don't speak about like game development, but just pure programming, I had at university some tasks usually to recreate some sort of functions using only certain functions, or don't use something else, like do not use basic function to recreate some algorithm, but to create something else. And was like an example of having like this constraint, because yeah, of course you would think at that point like that it's stupid and I should be able to use this. It's a basic function, but still it makes you think more creative and try to, go around something, because uh, yeah, if you will actually need something to do in real life, um, you will not have this opportunity to just use something. You will have to go around, and then you will not have this, ability to do, or like maybe even skill to do so. And I think when like producers or like the lead game designer tells you that you have to obey some sort of constraint, it's better than just having everything in front of you. Well, at least give yourself something like this. And it's a great example to set this also in real life. You shouldn't eat and drink something unhealthy for you all the time. You can do that, but still, in order to get somewhere and be healthy, you should have some constraint that you put on yourself. So the same way goes to the game development. Put some constraints in the beginning, at least.
Yeah, I love that too. And again, I think this is a universal thing. If you look even more broadly, it's like if let's look at it from a parenting perspective. I'll use my own lens on this front, considering I have three kids. You know, if I do every single thing possible for my kids, and sometimes I feel I do this too much in some ways, but it's like, oh, they don't do anything, they don't lift a finger or whatever, and I'm doing it all. And then if I'm not around, like I'm out somewhere else, and they want something, and they're like, oh, Dad's always doing this for me. Then they're like, now what? Right? There's no creative process. It might force them. It might be creating a lot of frustration and everything else. But the same, I think that concept is applicable to anything, whether it's life or whether you're trying to solve problems. If you always have access to everything, if you always have all the, like, I know this is a thing when I was in film school. It's like everybody's like, oh, I need this camera to do this, or I need this item, product, whatever, to be able to do this. It's the reality is most cases, more often than not, you don't. But how do you then use what you have in a creative way? And it starts, like you were saying, the brain starts working and starts coming up with like different creative solutions to these problems. And through those limitations, you're actually able to then like break those rules essentially in a creative and graceful manner, as opposed to then having them and not necessarily using them to the best of your ability, or that you have potential to. So I love how all these things kind of like interconnect and everything else. Now, speaking of, I mentioned film real briefly, but I think this will be interesting to dive into as well. Because there's a lot of comparisons I think we can draw from other mediums, other industries and such. So I'm curious from your perspective, Lisa, like how does the creative process and game development also compare to, let's say, other creative industries, whether it be like, film, animation, and art, do you think that there's unique challenges or opportunities that game developers face in terms of creativity and innovation as it relates to those other industries?
Yeah, of course. I would say that we can call film and animation like older brother gaming.
Yeah.
But uh, the like film and animation game development involves like the storytelling as a central element usually. Developers craft narratives, characters, and world to engage with players and like sometimes evoke emotions. And this is kind of similar to how filmmakers create compelling stories for audience. Also, all three relies heavily on visual and audio design to convey mood, atmosphere, and narrative. So artists, animators, sound designers, so they collaborate to create immersive experiences through visuals and compelling soundscapes. I would say like animation and film also use today more or less technical people, like also programmers, some animators as well in movies. Uh, but like we have these additional elements in gaming development process. Um, Also, I would say that these three forms of art, I would say, iterative. Ideas evolve through the prototyping, playtesting, like uh, some some rehearsals, and these iterations goes to refine gameplay and mechanics, like visuals in movies and storytelling elements, because like sometimes you put it on the paper, it looks great, but then you see it on the screen or like on the stage and it doesn't work. It doesn't spark. And until they meet the desired quality, they do that a lot of times. And also here we go for to the gaming like as a player experience, and yeah, there are some challenges and opportunities like that are unique to the gaming, but I think maybe in movies and animations they kind of will look up to the gaming as well. So I would say the main thing is interactivity. So unlike films and animations where audience passively watches the story unfold, players actively shape the narrative and the gameplay experience. This interactive element requires developers to design non-linear storytellings sometimes, um, dynamic gameplay system, and meaningful player choices. So it's like, yeah, we have linear games where you just click some random dialogues and it doesn't change like the main story. But now we have games where you have to choose meaningful sometimes, and I actually like these games. So this results in player agency. So you allow player to explore the worlds, make decisions, and interact with characters and objects. Um, this player represents like challenges and opportunities for developers to create engaging experience that respond to player actions and choices. This fosters a sense of immersion and ownership over the narrative. So this is one of the things like we already talked about the immersive experience, how the physics does that, how the visuals, how the sounds, and also like this whole storytelling thing as well. So it's like also the main idea of player playing the game, also creating this immersive experience. And also this is kind of since this industry is like developed, and I would say technical constraints again. So game developers often face technical constraints related to hardware limitation, performance, and also low end like hardware. So people who will play your game also have to be able to like to run this game and like across multiple platforms, like also like the compatibility, all that stuff. So you have to balance creative vision and technical feasibility. But I would say till a certain point, cinematography and animation had similar problem. So one of the examples is like the movie Halloween, which was made in 1978, I think. The filmmakers employed an editing technique to, cover the length of the film during the scene where young Michael Myers like walks. They seamlessly like inserted a film cut when the walk exceeded the intended 8 minutes, like it was the length of the film, and they covered with a mask, so it was effectively concealed. So there was no break in the continuity while maintaining the scene pacing. So and this is so elegant, and this is so we don't have this problem now in a cinematography, but still it's like this is the great example of how you can creatively overcome this and you know save this vibe in the entire scene in general. Yeah.
Yeah, so many great examples there, and to add another one to the Halloween one you just shared, Alfred Hitchcock did that as well with Rope, because same exact restraints. 8 minutes is basically the length of the film magazine, and they want it to be this ongoing. So it's almost like in a way the actors were also preparing like if it were a play, like they were on stage the whole time. It's just 8 minute segments essentially that they had to work with, but they did the same exact thing where someone in this party or whatever is walking by the screen, and then that's when they initiated a cut at the end of the reel, and then moved on to create this level of immersion. Like, oh, you're experiencing everything in that exact moment. There's no transition of time or anything there too. So that's a good one. But I also want to say, I mean, everything you mentioned again, it's like coming accumulation of things where the immersion, have players having agency, and then even getting into the technical side, all of these things in a way, if we think about it, are relating to accessibility and beyond the typical high level sense we might think of, controller support and who that might be supportive of, but really just accessibility as a whole. And because this is so important in the industry, in the work we do, especially when it comes to even everything to marketing a game. Um, I'm curious, like from your perspective, like how do these everything that we mentioned, especially how like technology is actually used in games now, whether it's in the development process or all the way to animation, aesthetics, and things along those lines. How would you say that some of these newer advancements out there impact the creative process in game development, especially as it relates to, let's say, reaching a broader audience?
Well, it actually is connected to the fact that today PC gaming is kind of becoming more elite thing. And last time I checked, like it was 2 years ago when I was doing research on adolescents obesity and how we can incorporate games into helping like to battle that. And at that time, I was actually checking that like what is the most common gaming platform, and it was a console. And I was thinking about like why is it how it is, and I think in most cases it's like the most gamers are like casual gamers, so it's kind of people would say stay in the living room and just play on their couch, and it's also like more financially accessible, and it's also like plug and play thing because when you build an PC you have to do everything. I've built PC by myself, and it's a little bit stressful to not to do anything wrong something. And if you have a console, you just get like HDMI or DisplayPort and just plug and play. And so before the pandemic, I was thinking that maybe people will return into game like computer clubs because for target audience, it's kind of expensive because it's more or less young people or teenagers who play video games. Um, these are the people who actually usually don't have those type of money for PC gaming now. And I was thinking, yeah, computer clubs will work out, and it's going to be a renaissance of computer clubs. But it didn't happen. The pandemic happened. But from that point, I think this is why cloud gaming actually got into like the scene. And the cloud gaming allows players to access games on various devices, including smartphones and low-end PCs, without the need for powerful hardware. And this expands the accessibility like gratefully. So in this case, the potential audience grows, and you can reach players who might not now have like access to traditional gaming consoles, like maybe even like more or less expensive ones, or high-end gaming PCs. So game developers can sometimes even lower their constraint, because if they think that in in the end of the day, people will still have this cloud gaming experience instead of buying the PC, they can lower these standards. But in this case, I think they still should consider a broad range of hardware configurations while designing the games, and not just having ultra stuff everywhere. And this also helps focus on cross-platform compatibility. So with cloud gaming's platform, you can kind of play on the PC, but you can play from your phone, or like because you will have the screen. And so it offers like seamless cross-platform gameplay, and developers are encouraged to prioritize cross-platform compatibility in their games. So like um, it's not even like cross-platform, but have more platforms to go around, and not having only exclusive for PlayStation or only for PC and something like this. I would say also this triggers technological advantages in cloud gaming, um, to explore solutions, how to enhance accessibility, and inclusivity in games, how to actually make this experience comfortable, so they can incorporate features such as adjustable difficulty settings, custom controls, assistive features like text to speech and audio, um, so something like this. So It also can help include players with disabilities or different gaming preferences because well, if you have, for example, a exclusive for PlayStation, and it doesn't have those features, but you can add them as a owner of cloud gaming service. It's going to be great because you can make it more versatile or more adjustable, and it can be done on top of, for example, existing games. Those who were really old already and those who will not get a remaster, for example. So it's additional tool that, and people don't talk about that much because mostly people mention cloud gaming as a tool to access games in general, not only like accessibility for other people as well. And I think it also push forward the global distribution localization. So today, I already mentioned that there are some games that were never released outside of Japan, for example. And so cloud gaming can help with the global distribution of games. So it can allow developers to reach players in regions where traditional distribution channels may be limited or inaccessible. And this represents opportunities for developers to expand their audience internationally and tailor their games to different cultural backgrounds and languages through localization efforts. So this creative process may evolve consider cultural sensitivities as well. So it's also can be we can expand the audience in this way as well. Um, yeah.
That was so great because and just to I think call out here, Lisa isn't necessarily, she's not saying like, oh, make a more casual or whatever game, but through the process of these things we discussed today, through those limitations and other elements, there are ways then to make a game, whatever that project may be that you want to make and you know that there's an audience for. And then through that process, that creative process of development, now it can actually be made more accessible, and this is already being implemented currently, folks. I think in the US and the UK on Netflix, they are beta testing basically games on the platform where anyone could just sit at their television set with their remote and interact and play some of these games. It may not be quite the same experience, but the fact that they're so accessible that it can now be put in a format on a platform like Netflix. And this is happening all over the place. So with these limitations, you can not only provide that really great immersive experience, reduce bottlenecks and save resources and time, but also increase, that accessibility and broaden your audience. While we might not be thinking about, hey, where do we stand when it comes to cloud gaming? I would say again, probably a good forward thinking mindset to understand, adapt, because it's going to do nothing but provide a lot of different solutions and opportunities for you down the road. Whether those happen or not, you're at least set up to take advantage of those when those things present themselves. So I love that you called out all these things, because I think, as a lot of developers, especially on the indie side, we don't necessarily think sometimes that broadly about what accessibility really means in these cases. So you painted a really good picture of that. And again, it might not happen now, but if you're leading with that idea and concept later, it's just going to put you in a better position. So if I were to distill everything from today, I'm going to say less is more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're definitely coming on time here. But before we close, would love for you to share, tips, suggestions, or emphasize some points that you made earlier in your show, because we discussed a lot. So what are some 3 things that you could share with us based off of our conversation?
Oh, speaking about physics programming, first. that I can understand. And if identify what do you want to get in the end. We spoke about that today. What the purpose of each animation, what type of vibe do you want to get, if I may, and what do you want to get from your game. Maybe you shouldn't like build up a lot of on top. Another thing I would say, be not afraid of creating something new. If you can't find something like a ready-made solution, maybe it has never been done and you can be the first one. But also, I would ask, like another thing, the third one, don't be a snob about like some classical approach, like academic approach to researching or learning about video game. Um, or like the video games theory in general, you still need to know the rules to break them gracefully. I think it applies to everything, to like cinematography, like animation. But I think since we kind of consider video games to become at least another form of art, you should do that too as well.
Awesome. Such great tips and suggestions there. And again, can't thank you enough for being here. But before you go, what are ways that people can connect with you, find more about your work or whatever it is? Please give us some links so we can, get in touch or learn about what you're playing.
Well, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. It's Lisa Karaseva. You also can find me on popular social media like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch. I stream there. My nickname is a Glamorous Fortune Teller. It's from my favorite game, The Legend of Mana, that I'm currently playing. And sometimes you can find me as a Lisa Fortune Teller because you cannot use more than 16 characters on some platforms.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lisa. Folks, if you want to reach out to Lisa, all that will be in the show notes. And thank you so much for this conversation. I think now we have a lot of reassessing to do and need to put some maybe some self-imposed limitations. And can't thank you enough for providing us that insight.
Yep. Thank you for having me. It was great experience for me too. Thanks.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.